Hello, this is Todd Luck, and let's talk about one of my favorite things in the world, Jim Shooter Comics. This is a guide to Defiant Comics. Defiant Comics is one of those lost superhero universes from the 90s, so most things I'm going to show you in this video are going to only be available as back issues. However, everything, or just about everything, should be common and affordable, and I'm going to go through every series and one-shot that they put out. And so I'm going to try to be concise, but there's a lot of territory to cover, so I'm going to divide this into chapters. All right, some really quick history. So in the early 90s, my favorite writer, Jim Shooter, started Valiant Comics. And just as Valiant was starting to take off, he had a falling out with his business partners. And so shortly after that, he started Defiant Comics. Like most superhero universes of the time, it quickly fell victim to the comic book market crash of the 90s, and unfortunately the company went under just as it was about to publish a crossover event that all of its titles had been leading up to called Schism. Right now there's a Kickstarter to finally print the 4-issue miniseries of Schism. It's a fan project working with the original creators to complete this 160-page epic. The Kickstarter runs through March 2nd, so please support it if you can. And so while many other independent superhero comics in the 90s and even today are very similar to what you find in DC and Marvel comics, Defiant Comics tried to put out unique, original concepts that readers hadn't seen before. They created comics that were very different from anything else on the market. Defiant Comics was set in the real world with locations like the Times Square McDonald's and Mile High Comics that you can actually visit in real life. Most people in the Defiant universe were unaware of the fantastic things that were happening all around them. Characters wear colorful but practical outfits. Some heroes don't even wear costumes at all and just wear cool-looking regular clothes. It's based on quantum theory, where things we imagine actually exist in other dimensions, and our thoughts can alter reality. While this is all standard stuff now, it was pretty radical for the time. Jim Shooter just excels at producing comics that are filled with creativity and realism, and also have a lot of hope and inspiration in its characters. So we're going to talk about the comics in this video, but the first 2 Zero issues were put out in a very unique format. Defiant was owned by a card company called the River Group. So Plasm Zero and Dark Dominion Zero were each released as card sets, and these are the binders for those card sets. The cards came in packs, and you put them together in a binder, and when you put them together, they formed comic book pages. River Group did put out a few other card sets of Defiant Comics, but these are standard trading cards, so we won't be dealing with those in this video. So how should you read these comics? Any way you want to. Each issue is written with a new reader in mind, and each title is written to stand on its own. My recommended reading order for Defiant is, if you can, to read them in the order in which they came out. This is the best way to enjoy the interwoven continuity between the titles. These guest appearances and the overall story being told was part of the fun of the line. But don't let the tightly coordinated continuity intimidate you. Every guest appearance is approached as a way to introduce the character to new readers. Guest appearances are meant to inform and intrigue the reader about other titles, not to confuse you or punish you for not reading everything. So I'm going to go over each series in the order that it was put out, and I'll denote where it premiered within that 13 months that Defiant put out regular titles. I'll have a written list in the description for this video. But I'll go even further with a second list by month of when each individual issue came out that'll also be in the description. This is a visual reference with each row representing a month. There's a real interplay between a lot of the issues that came out in a given month. Now, I don't expect you guys to buy all 50 plus comics they put out at once, but the monthly list will give you the option for when you're buying individual issues from mycomicshop.com or some other site to get them and read them by the month they came out. This is the ideal way I would recommend reading any new superhero universe comics from the 90s, whether that's Valiant or Milestone or Ultraverse or whatever. Jim Shooter did a lot of cross-continuity at Valiant, and since that was successful, every other new line of comics at the time imitated him, but very few could do it better than Jim Shooter himself. All right, with all that out of the way, let's get started with the comics. So Defiant Comics kicked off with Warriors of Plasm. This was the only title that was published all 13 months of regular publication. And so, of course, the last issue was Warriors of Plasm 13. The zero-issue card set was published before the first issue, and by the way, all the artwork I'm going to show you on Plasm is done by David Lapham. The Org of Plasm is an organic world where everything is grown, nothing is made. Buildings, vehicles, and weapons are all grown from bioplasm. People bioengineer their own bodies, changing them to imitate the latest fads. To maintain this decadent world, the Org has a massive military force that conquers and ravages other worlds, consuming every living thing on it to feed the Org. There is no value for individual life on Plasm. Any expression of individuality, like love, is forbidden. The world building in Warriors of Plasm is amazing, right down to their national pastime, Splatterball, which actually has several issues of its own. The Zero issue, written by Jim Shooter, remains to this day one of my favorite single-issue stories of all time, with a thorough introduction to the Org of Plasm and a powerful character study of one of its greatest champions. It focuses on Lorca, a seeker who finds worlds to be ravaged for the Org. The story shows all aspects of life on the Org, creating a world I felt like I could just live in. And it follows Lorca's life both at work and after hours, helping us understand the alien society. And ultimately, we see his character come to doubt his deeply held beliefs about the society he serves. In order to read Plasm or Dark Dominion Zero, you can get boxes of cards for each and open up packs until you get the complete sets. I did this with Dark Dominion Zero back in the day, and it was a lot of fun. It was also released in card tins that included the full basic set plus extras. This is the common one, and there's a rarer premium edition tin that's much harder to find. But you don't have to do that. You can go on eBay and you can buy full card sets, or you can buy binders that already have all the cards in them. And this is what the original card binder looks like. And this is what the second printing card binder looks like, and there is a third printing, but it's pretty rare. This is what the back of the first two printings of the binder look like, and it has this offer on the back where you can send away to get the back cover art. And this is what the back cover art looks like in the card binder. It also came with a Splatterball comic in the back of the binder that's written and drawn by David Lapham. If you don't want to mess with cards, Plasm Zero was bound into the June 1993 issue of Diamond Comics Previews. If you see one that looks like this, that just means that someone like me cut it out of their issue of Previews. It was also available as a convention exclusive, but those are very rare. Probably the easiest way to get all this is the Warriors of Plasm trade paperback. This was the only trade that was put out for Defiant, and it contains issues 0 through 4, and also contains the Splatterball comic, as well as some interesting character designs by David Lapham. However, if you can, I recommend getting the cards, because along with the story, you get cards on characters and vehicles in the series, which not only have gorgeous artwork, but also have bios and stats on the back that flesh out the universe even more than what they could do in the comics. Plasm 1 through 4, also written by Jim Shooter, shows Lorca trying to change his world, and it also introduces us to the Warriors of Plasm, who are these humans who were kidnapped and subjected to a genetic experiment, and much to everyone's surprise, they end up with superpowers. And some of these heroes broke superhero conventions, like Glory, who is a regular grandmother who ends up with super strength and becomes one of the leaders of the Defiant universe, and she was going to spin off into her own series. So between the issues 4 and 5, there was a graphic novel called Warriors of Plasm, Home for the Holidays. This was written by Len Wein and has art by Dave Cockrum. So after issue 4 of Plasm, Jim Shooter lets other writers write the Defiant titles, but he is credited as co-writer on quite a few of them. One of the highlights of the series is Warriors of Plasm 8 and 9, where David Lapham not only draws it, but also writes a story of the Great Grimmax, who is a Splatterball superstar and dissident, and it's really, really good stuff. Also worth noting is that one of only 2 Schism crossovers was published in Warriors of Plasm, with issue 13, which gives you a great overview about what would have happened in that story. And of course, after Warriors of Plasm ends, David Lapham would go on to start Stray Bullets and become the king of crime comics, producing, in my opinion, one of the best comic series ever done. Dark Dominion joins the line in the 3rd month of publication, which appropriately was October 1993. The 0 issue actually came out the next month in November, but if you want to read it before the 1st issue, that makes sense to me. And Dark Dominion ended with issue 10. Dark Dominion is about a quantum substratum that exists all around us that we can't see, where our fears manifest themselves as demons and monsters that feed on our negative emotions. It's about this aging writer named Michael Alexander, who's a normal dude, but because he's learned to conquer his fear, he can see and enter into the Dark Dominion, where he's extremely powerful. He can actually destroy people's demons, but they'll just grow back if the individual can't stop the emotions that caused them in the first place. Michael's bigger problem is there are humans who've mastered the Dark Dominion, who rule over the demons there, most notably Chasm, who becomes the big bad of the Defiant universe. It's worth noting that all the interiors I've shown you were written by Len Wein, with art by Joe James and colors by Tim Perkins, but there's other creators who worked on the series as well. Among them are Jim Shooter and Steve Ditko, who did Dark Dominion 0, which was a solid origin establishing the concept and main characters. Unlike Plasm 0, this is only available as cards. But like Plasm, it has cards about the expansive supporting cast of the series, which are really cool. But the cards also include additional demons on the back for every type of fear and vice imaginable. Dark Dominion demons do everything from creating anxiety to causing computer malfunctions so they can feed off your frustration. It's fascinating stuff. There's only one binder for the 0 issue card set, and it has a Steve Ditko cover. And this is what the back looks like, and it has an offer to get the back cover art. And here's what it looks like with the back cover art on the binder. It also included a certificate that you could mail away to get a free Origin of Chasm comic. Unfortunately, that comic never came out. River Group was unfortunately not the best business partners for Defiant. Overall, there were a lot of cool concepts and a lot of potential with Dark Dominion, and we'll see some of that realized in Schism, assuming the Kickstarter does get funded. Good Guys joined the lineup in the 4th month of publication with Good Guys number 1. And its final issue was Good Guys number 9. Good Guys focuses on how people's wishes can alter reality. There's kids who are at a big event at Mile High Comics. They're thinking about how cool it would be to be a superhero. Then a disturbance in reality happens that affects them, and they end up getting superpowers and decide to form a team, which they can't quite agree on the name of. One unique twist is that Defiant held a contest to cast the heroes, asking young readers to send in either a sketch or short essay about the type of hero they'd like to be. There's an excellent 4-page article about it in the 3rd issue. The craziest thing is the deadline for submissions was October 1st. The winners were announced October 15th. The first issue shipped in November. Working against this impossible deadline was a new artist named Gray, whose rendering was understandably inconsistent, but his storytelling and layouts were top-notch. He drew the first 2 issues. He also drew Good Guys One Night in Hollywood, a 26-page story that was serialized in Diamond Comics previews for 12 issues. It was going to be collected in an issue called Good Guys 1.5, but that never came out. The great thing is that the entire story is available online for free at shooterswork.com. The story takes place during issue 2 of Good Guys. By Good Guys issue 4, Greg Boone takes over as the regular artist for the rest of the series, and he knocks it out of the ballpark. His dynamic style is perfect for the kinetic action and inventive use of powers that was a highlight of the series. But another highlight was the characters themselves. Even with a cast of 8 heroes, the writers managed to make each of them distinct and interesting characters who actually felt like real teenagers. We got to meet each of their parents and got to know each kid and see them grow and change, sometimes in surprising ways. I would have never guessed in issue 1 who would be the leader by the final plot line. It's just a well-done series, and they had some really cool plans for some of the characters. As a teenager at the time, this series was a breath of fresh air and a nice change of pace from some other teen superheroes at the time who just felt like condescending caricatures. It was just nice to see teen characters who were taken seriously and written in a way that actually felt real. In the 7th month of publication, War Dancer joins the lineup. This is by Jim Shooter and Alan Weiss, and War Dancer would run until issue 6. War Dancer is an ancient god from a world created by the collective imagination of mankind. Long ago, things went horribly wrong and his world was destroyed and he was trapped in the void as pure energy. He emerges in our time and is very powerful but is also cold and detached after his time in the void. To offset this, the series surrounds him with colorful supporting characters like the wrestler Ballistic Billy. It seemed like an interesting concept, and the artwork by Alan Weiss was gorgeous. I was curious to see where they were going to go after the first plot line. So the first story arc has War Dancer realizing that the realms of reality and imagination were merging, and he decides that the universe is just too messed up to save. And so he decides it's better to destroy the entire thing before the worst happens. This brings him into conflict with Charlemagne, and so that creates an interesting back and forth between those two titles. So let's talk about Charlemagne. Charlemagne joins the lineup in the 8th month of publication. This is 1 month after War Dancer. In the previous month, a Charlemagne Zero was included in with Hero Illustrated number 9. This is a story that takes place during the first issue of Charlemagne. It happens towards the end of the issue after he's defeated the pirates. And Charlemagne would end with issue 5. The main writer on the series was D.G. Chichester, and the artist was Adam Pollina, who would go on to work for Marvel and do some video game art. Charlemagne starts in 1973 with Charles Smith, a boy who discovers his brother went MIA in the Vietnam War. Charles runs away from home and, using his wits and determination, gets to Vietnam, where he roams the countryside in a desperate quest to find his brother. He finds him only to lose him to an attack by the U.S. He swears never again as a bomb explodes, putting him in a coma. He awakens in modern times with power to make good on that promise. He discovers his super strength when pirates attack the Bodhi Zone in one of the coolest fight scenes I've ever seen. Once he's stateside, War Dancer declares him the champion of life and challenges him to a battle to determine if he'll destroy the world or not. Charles will grow in his powers and abilities as he tracks down War Dancer and trains to defeat him. It's kind of like an anime. It created this really interesting back and forth between the two titles, War Dancer and Charlemagne, that was going to culminate in a big final battle between the two of them in Schism. But I was also very interested to know where they were going to go after that. There was a hint of that in Charlemagne Zero because this guy was going to be his first villain after Schism. And this is Mr. New, who was a murderous kickboxer who gains superpowers and takes over the Thailand underworld. And so Charlemagne was going to return to Asia and have it out with this guy. And if for some reason you only want to get these two titles, remember that War Dancer begins 1 month before Charlemagne number 1. And be sure to pick up Charlemagne's appearance in Good Guys number 7 because it ties in a really cool way. Dogs of War number 1 joins the lineup in the 9th month publication, taking us on a darker ride. It ends with issue 5. The writing is by Art Holcomb and the artwork is by Georges Gente. So Dogs of War stars Shooter, who's one of the warriors of Plasm. He's returning to Earth after he's done fighting the wars on Plasm. He has enhanced agility, speed, and invisibility, and he wants to do something with that, so he tries his hand at being a vigilante. He goes after bad guys everywhere from back alleys to boardrooms. The series explores how he figures out who to target and what happens when they try to stop him by hiring badass guys like Shotgun here. The comic explores how being a vigilante affects Shooter, the toll it takes on his life, and what happens when he gets in over his head. He's a deeply flawed but well-intentioned protagonist you grow to care about. There have been several comics that have attempted to explore what it would take to be a real vigilante, and this is one of my favorites. The final issue is one of only 2 Schism tie-ins to be published, and this one shows what it's like to be on the street when Schism is happening, how it affects normal people. After this, Holcomb would go on to write comics for various different companies, and Gente would go on to work for Marvel, DC, and Dark Horse, and he would be the artist on Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8. Prudence and Caution would join the Defiant lineup in its 10th month of publication, and it's by Chris Claremont and Jim Fern. And it wouldn't get very far. Its second issue would be its final one. Prudence is an uber-powerful conqueror who escaped a prison on Plasm and is hiding out on Earth pretending to be a normal chick. She meets Mouse, one of the warriors of Plasm, who's now once again living on Earth. Before he got his powers, he lost his arm in an accident, and that makes him a little cautious. Some mysterious bad guys come after Mouse, and Prudence fights them. And then Mouse ends up on Plasm, and the series ends. I don't know where this was going. Unlike the other series, Chris Claremont was taking his sweet time getting to whatever the heck this thing was about. But considering both Claremont and Fern are really great talents, I'm sure that this would have gotten good if it had been able to continue. So that is all of the series they put out. So let's talk about one-off stories. Let's start with the Great Grimmax 0. This was a Hero Illustrated 15, and according to the cover, it was in August of 1994, which was Defiant's final month of publication, and this stars Grimmax from Plasm. It's a weird, quirky story about how Grimmax is trying to make a living in New York, and I don't know if it would have had much bearing on the ongoing series that they were planning for him, but it does have some really great Dave Cockrum art. Next up was Glory Zero, which was a self-contained short story serialized in Overstreet Comic Book Monthly 15 through 18. It was put out at the end of Defiant's run, but takes place a little earlier in continuity, as Glory tries to balance fighting against insurgents on Plasm with her husband she left back on Earth. Like Grimmax, I'm not sure how much connection it would have had with the ongoing series, but it's a good story that gives you the gist of the character. My understanding is that there was a comic collecting the entire story that was a convention exclusive, but it's very rare. Fortunately, all the pages in the story are available for free at shooterswork.com. I'll put a link in the description below. All right, here's Defiant Genesis. This was a convention exclusive in October of '93, the 3rd month of publication. It's fairly common, pretty easy to find. And so this is not a comic, this is actually text describing the origin of the Defiant universe and describing the concepts within. And at the time, the 3rd month of publication, this would have actually contained a spoiler for some of the comics that would come out later, but it acted as a really intriguing preview for what was going to come in the different series. And it comes in this sleeve, and the sleeve actually has a little Defiant logo on it. And some copies of this are going to have a card insert and some will not. The origin of the Defiant universe is literally the exact same thing, except this was available in comic shops in the 7th month of publication. And at that point, if you'd read Plasm number 7, it doesn't contain any spoilers, but it does contain a very intriguing tease for the upcoming crossover Schism. Before Plasm Zero was released, 1,000 copies of The Birth of the Defiant Universe were given out at a retailer expo. It came with gloves and had a gag letter that said, "The gloves are off." This contained completely different material from Defiant Genesis and the origin of the Defiant Universe. It still had all text, but most of it was told from the perspective of characters who witnessed the events that happened in the different series. It included early images of some of the characters that were different from what we eventually got. This is unfortunately very expensive, going for well over $100. So while it's a great part of history, it is certainly something you can do without as far as the stories in the comics go. And while we're trying to cover everything, there was a comic book on audio tape that came with the premium edition Plasm 10 that was limited to 5,555 copies. This was a cassette tape with an introduction by Jim Shooter and a short audio drama telling the origin of the org of Plasm, complete with actors, music, sound effects. It's a great story and a well-done production. The Premium 10 is unfortunately hard to come by, but there is a YouTube video where Defiant collector Jim Hollister plays the tape, so I'll link to that in the description. Again, if you're looking to avoid spoilers for the comics, you want to listen to it after Plasm number 7. And if I'm being thorough, I have to include the non-crossover with Triumphant Comics. This consists of 12 double-page spreads at the center of all 12 issues of Triumphant's crossover event, Triumphant Unleashed. It's massive. It's even bigger than the world's biggest comic panel that was done in Solar Man of the Atom at Valiant. Half of the drawing is done by War Dancer creator Alan Weiss, featuring characters from War Dancer's World and Lorca from Plasm. The other half is drawn by Dr. Chaos creator Greg Fox, who in my opinion was Triumphant's best artist, showcasing Dr. Chaos's cast as well as Captain Zemos from Scavengers. The image shows the meeting of Triumphant's Dr. Chaos and Defiant's War Dancer before his series premiered. The idea here is that while War Dancer was in the void, he had a chance encounter with Dr. Chaos. They shake hands and see each other's world before parting ways. Due to them being in a state of quantum uncertainty, this event may or may not have happened, which is true of all cross-company crossovers, I guess. The crossover is just in this one 22-page image. The story in Triumphant Unleashed has nothing to do with Defiant Comics or this crossover image. The crossover is not narratively important. It's just a nice piece to have. There's instructions in the back of each issue to tell you how to put it together. The issues in Triumphant Unleashed are Chromium Man 4 and 5, Scavengers 5 and 6, Riot Gear 3 and 4, Prince Vandal 1 and 2, Triumphant Unleashed 0, which begins to crossover, Dr. Chaos 1 and 2, and Triumphant Unleashed 1, which is the finale. If you put all the covers together, they form a big T. And that is everything I know of for now. Hopefully the Kickstarter will get funded and we'll get Schism. If I've missed anything, let me know in the comments below. I want to thank everyone who contributed information for this video, Jim Hollister and the folks over at the Defiant Comics fans group on Facebook, shooterswork.com, the late Defiant One, David Pass, and everyone who contributed to his websites. The Defiant fan community is small, but we are mighty. All right, that's it. Like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, never, ever give up and stay defiant.